Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. And I have here Mr. John Blangero, and he's down in Port Isabel, Texas, just a little south from where I'm at, down in the valley. Anyway, he's got an album that's coming out pretty soon, right? October 1st.
New Sun King Rising album, which is my what I perform under, the moniker I professionally perform under, and it's my second album, also being released on PeacockSunrise Records. And as you said, the release date is October 1st, so there's a flurry of activity going on at the record company these days, and last minute polishing of videos and whatnot. So but we're excited about this record.
4 days before my birthday.
Yeah, all right. I'll send you a copy.
Oh, nice. That'll work. Well, I did get to listen to the album because I'm privileged enough to get the links before it comes out. And I really enjoyed it. We'll say it was kind of along the lines of Ides of March or Spiral Staircase, Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Yeah. That's that horn element going for it. God, especially on the first side, there's a lot of horn. I love that Muscle Shoals kind of vibe for horns, and yeah, I think the first side's pretty much we call it kind of it's got a Southern soul vibe, and the second side's maybe a little bit more Southern rocky, but it was a work of love, and we're very happy with the way it's come out. And it definitely does have that retro vibe. I've always been a super admirer of Leon Russell and Joe Cocker, and one of my favorite albums of all time is Mad Dogs and Englishmen with those two, and I wanted that kind of vibe going for it, and I think we captured it in a couple of places.
Well, if you took that and kind of mashed it with Mark Broussard, that's kind of what I'm hearing. My wife was like, that sounds like my favorite singer, Mark Broussard. I said, yeah, I can kind of hear that. Yeah. Cool. It's kind of a little bit of that bluesy Southern gospel kind of sound, and really enjoyed it.
That's pretty much the influences. And then I've got I'm not a tenor. I got a baritone voice going, so it's I kind of got one of those big baritones.
Well, I like it, and even though it's got that kind of that category to it, it's still its own album. It doesn't sound like you're copying anybody, and it's got some really good listening. There's some ballads in there, and I really enjoy that, being able to kick back sometimes and enjoy it.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, you try when you're even sequencing an album, when you're deciding the order of songs, there's a bit of a science to that, to keep the listener engaged. And in this day and age, people are so much, they really are used to now hearing a song at a time or whatnot. But I really hope that people have the time they can sit down and listen through this whole album, because there was put a lot of thought into it being a coherent whole. So it's kind of got a little bit of a concept going for it in there, but it's yeah. So I hope people can have the time to listen to the whole thing.
Well, the best thing is, and I have to say, I'm an acquaintance of your PR guy, Billy James, and he sends me music, and I get to listen to it before I decide, who I'm going to get on the show. And it doesn't have that corporate sound to it. It's it's more of that independent vision that we used to have, and it seems like it's kind of faded away and gone more corporate.
Yeah, even amongst the independents, you kind of get some homogenization these days. So I do believe it's a very, it sounds trite in a sense, but it's a very organic record, and it's all real musicians generally playing together in the same room, and there's not one lick of auto tune on this thing, and there's none of that digital mimicry or things like that. So it's pretty much the way people used to make records with, you know, real musicians, and so we think sonically it sounds great. I mean, we're very proud of just the sound quality of the album. And part of that's, I had a great producer, a guy named Acker, who I worked with on my last album also, and we have fabulous mixing. We had a great recording engineer, Dave Granati, and a great mixing and mastering engineer named Brian Foraker from Nashville, who's done lots and lots of big names. So we wanted it to sound good, and I think we've achieved that.
Well, in a world where we get sampling from older music and everything's done on a computer, it's nice to have real musicians playing on the songs, and I really admire and respect music for music.
Yeah.
So even though I like a little poppy tune here and there, you know, the Beatles were real poppy, and nothing wrong with that. But to have, you know, like a jam going on, it's almost as if you're right there watching all your guys playing the music. I can almost visualize the horns and the guitar and everything else, and that is a refreshing escape from what's going on nowadays.
Yeah, it leads to a really different kind of vibe. You know, you can feel the energy of the you know, the bass player and the drummer playing together. I mean, that's a critical interconnection that you just can't, you know, if everybody's playing in their own room somewhere, you lose some of that energy. So it's it definitely helps feed the creativity of the individual musicians. And every so often you capture, you know, lightning in the bottle. Like there's one of the songs, it's more traditional blues, Buried in the Blues. It's on the first side, and that one's basically all live, and it was just wing it, and we just got this incredible sax solo out of Kenny Blake, who's a very well-known jazz musician, and he just nailed it and just elevated the whole track. So it was one of those exciting moments during the production of the album.
See, that's another thing you don't see as much nowadays, is the band playing live and being recorded that way, instead of, oh well, my bass player will be in tomorrow and we'll just play the guitar riff for him, and then, you know, next day the drummer will come in.
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable with schedules and everything, but it loses something. Like I say, I think especially for a rhythm section, you need the energy of playing off one another to really. And I mean, my rhythm section's unbelievable. I mean, George Perilli's the drummer, and if you listen, the drumming is out of this world on this album. And he, for many years, toured. He was Michael McDonald's touring drummer. So,
oh wow,
the guy knows how to play soul and funk, you know. And then George Elliott's a bass player, and he's just a marvelous melodic bassist who also knows how to bring the rhythm to it, you know. So those two guys make me sound great. I'm kind of the third part of the rhythm section, because I play acoustic piano, and that's, you know, it's a very rhythmic instrument. So between the three of us, I think, you know, there's a lot of cool rhythms going on across these songs.
You kind of share something in common with Queen's Brian May, don't you?
Yeah, there's not too many people in music who are also scientists. Of course, he did it the opposite way that I did. I became a scientist first, and so I got my PhD. I gave up music and got my PhD in genetics. I'm a medical researcher kind of scientist, and then decided I needed to get back into music and started this all up. And Brian did it the other way. First, he became an extremely wealthy rock star, and then he decided to go back and finish his PhD. So,
and you're still teaching, right?
Yeah, I don't really teach much, but I do research. But I will say I'm a much better known scientist than Brian May as a scientist, but he's an infinitely more famous musician than me.
What's the biggest thing you've worked on?
Oh, I do a lot of things. I mean, I have a big project that's been based in San Antonio for now since 30 years. That's a big population project where we follow large Mexican American families and have been doing the genetics of heart disease and diabetes, and now things like Alzheimer's disease risk and things like that. So currently the coolest thing I'm working on is I have a big stem cell program where we've learned how to make different kinds of cell types and tissues from blood cells that we collect from our subjects, and then kind of study them in depth. So it was a good time. I got into the genetics field just at the right time, just when technology was about to explode and let us do things that we never thought were going to be possible when I first started. So I was able to ride that wave at the right time. It still is a very exciting thing. I mean, I must say I have a fabulous job being able to study these kinds of important problems.
Any plans on cloning somebody?
Yeah, well, I mean, this stem cell stuff is a kind of cloning where you can make mini organoids. So you can, for example, make mini small kind of pea-sized brain organoids, and then that have all the electrical activity that you need in order to understand how things work together. And we do that in the context of knowing people's complete genomic sequences, so we can relate genetic variation to these different functional attributes of brain related activity and brain cells and whatnot. So it's an amazing time. Technology is really stunning. So the speed of progress is very fast these days. So it certainly keeps me busy. I'm not one of these musicians who complains about their day job. I think mine's pretty cool.
My wife might be calling you to see if you could make a brain for me. So
I think the size of the one I could make maybe not be what she's looking for.
That might be bigger than what I have. So in your career, both in science and in music, what have been your biggest hurdles?
Well, it's all, so for science is really about having, well, you need some innate ability, I'm sorry to say. I mean, but you also need an enormous amount of perseverance. So I was lucky because I was very good at math, and it turned out that now with the big data age where we generate massive amounts of data, it turns out that math skills and those abilities have become very important for making sense of lots of scientific data. So, but I'd say it's it's having the right kind of mindset to see things through, because it takes a very long time. It's 86. I was approaching 30 when I got my PhD, and I had basically been in school the whole time, and trying to learn enough so that I could pursue a career of independent biomedical research. So it's hard. It's the usual thing, hard work and perseverance.
What would you say has been your biggest triumph?
Well, I solved a couple of problems along the way that are still, I developed a couple of techniques that are widely used to find genes for diseases now. So I've had luck in that area. I've been able, I worked extensively jointly with drug development and identifying new targets for different diseases. So some of that has led to some very nice and new biological information, and hopefully things that will directly affect people's lives down the path. It's very slow. The process is very slow, of course. That's how science really works. And so that's where patience comes in. But I needed the musical thing to be able to turn off all the thoughts about work all the time. And when you're doing music, you're not thinking about anything else. So it's the perfect complement. And there are actually a lot of scientists who who are musicians, kind of, especially there's a lot of mathematicians who are musicians because there's such a inherent mathematical basis to a lot of, to most music theory. It really has an underlying kind of mathematical basis.
Might get you to help me with my diabetes then.
Sure. What kind is it?
Type
1,
2.
type 2? Yeah,
Type
that's
2.
what I've worked on the most. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a heart attack when I was 36 years old.
Oh.
That's when I found out I was diabetic and had high blood pressure and all those great and wonderful things. So yeah,
Very, very common constellation of metabolic problems there. That's we see a lot of those things track together ultimately. So
my triglycerides at that time were 1,500.
holy, and
Yeah.
wow, and that's at a fasted level you had that. Wow, that's amazing. That's you're lucky to be you're lucky your blood's moving. That's a lot of lipid circulating there.
Oh yeah, when they gave me all the blood thinners, my stomach looked like Mike Tyson used it for a punching bag.
Yep. Yeah. Well, you're lucky. I mean, because we've made enormous gains and that's one, especially that kind of lipid related cardiovascular risk. The drugs that have come out of the genetic era have really changed people's lives and extended them. So you're lucky you weren't, our fathers wouldn't have made it through with those kinds of numbers.
Yeah. Well, I was 240 pounds and now I'm down to 180. So that's helped quite a bit.
Certainly always plays a role in those metabolic related disorders.
Yeah. Went from insulin to metformin. So,
good for you. Good for you. Yeah. Well, metformin is almost a wonder drug. It's radically improved people's high glucose issues.
Yeah, it's better than using your stomach for a pin cushion. That's for sure.
So you have definitely benefited from biomedical research.
I definitely have. So,
Yeah.
do you mainly just play piano?
Yeah, I mean, I play on the album. I play a bit of Hammond organ too, but mainly I like to stick with the acoustic piano. I just like that sound. I love, I'm a big fan of early Elton John, and I already mentioned Leon Russell. So I have some, I just love the piano. It's got a lot of it's fabulous for songwriting because you can kind of hear lots of things all at once, and it's a nice solo instrument too. So every day I sit down, every morning I'm at the piano. I tend to write songs in the morning, so I play minimum an hour a day, and then I'm not thinking about other things. So it's kind of a zen thing where you can't be playing music and thinking about, I gotta, my bank statement needs to be examined or anything like that. So.
Right. Well, most of the people that I talk to, they start out young and they pick up a guitar or they pick up the drums, something like that. What made you decide piano?
The same thing. Probably I was pushed into it. We had a piano, and my mother started me on lessons when I was 5 years old.
Wow.
And I had a kind of this, and I learned from a teacher, great, nice older woman but she only was teaching me hymns, right? So I had a lot of that going on, and that still enters. I mean, I have a lot of gospel influences that come through my playing.
I can
tell. Really starts back, all the way back then. And I guess I took lessons for, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so, a bit more maybe. And then I got tired of it and I wanted to, do something else, like play sports and stuff. And then when I got back, when rock and roll started to attract me, and then I wanted to be, and I was a front man for a pretty decent ended up being a pretty decent regional band that was called Harlequin, booked out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then I got back into playing again, except now he's playing a different kind of piano. I mean, I started writing music, and I went back to my piano skills. But then I had to kind of relearn everything, because it was not so much, reading off of a, typical music score, but then trying to understand chord progressions and how songs are put together and things like that. So that was fun. And then I did that up until I decided that we'd shopped at, an album's worth of material around all the labels, and we weren't getting any interest. And then I just had to decide I better start looking at something else for a career, because I have lots of musician friends, and to say that the struggling musician is a stereotype, well, it is, but it's based on a lot of fact that it's a very, very tough road to go down, and be able to do all the things in life that are people generally want to be able to do.
Well, one thing that's been kind of a common theme from the people that I've interviewed is that they tried so hard for a long time, and like you, they'd shop around their music and nobody was biting, and so they just get into whatever job they can find. I mean, you got into something really, really important, and a lot of these guys, were waiters and carpenters, that kind of thing. And I mean, not that they're not important jobs, but I mean,
Yeah.
look what you went through to get the degree.
Yeah. But I basically had to give up music at that point. I wasn't even playing casually at all. I mean, I really had to, bear down and work very hard for a long time. And then I was missing something, and that's when music came back in. And I also missed playing live with musicians. So I was in San Antonio, and I decided to get into the bar band scene again. And I just wanted to, I basically started playing with blues bands. And I had come out, my prior work, my prior band was much more of a kind of a progressive rock. So very, long songs, ornate, orchestration and whatnot. And then I flipped it all around and went back to the basics, and then, kind of learned how to play blues, which I'd never really done when I was younger, so, but I always, like I said, I always liked that kind of music. And I like, I like guys like Van Morrison also, and then really, figured out, then I started to learn how to be a real songwriter and craft a song. And I must say, my biggest thrill comes from songwriting. And when I come up with something that I think is good, it's very satisfying. And then if somebody else likes it, that's the real icing on the cake. That's why I'm very proud of the songs on this new album. They all came pretty fast when we were developing this album, and I think it's definitely some of the best songs that I've ever written.
What inspires you the most when you write a song?
You never know where it's going to come from. So, like most writers, I keep a book of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And I must say, very often I do start from a title, to tell you the truth. I find some cool title in my head, and then I end up, then I kind of write around it. And, I tend to write very, story-based songs. And so it's kind of fun to, think up the whole, I try to write, like, mini opera in a song, and then I wanted to tell a whole story of some kind, and so it's although I must say, for this next the new material I'm working on for the next album, I'm trying to back away from the stories a bit and try to write. I'd like to write a great classic song, a song that could fit into a wide variety of situations and not be so idiosyncratic as some of the characters in my songs tend to be.
What do you like to do outside of the music and school? I mean, your research.
That's it. I travel a lot. I travel a lot because of my scientific career and because of my music career. So I would say travel's the most, kind of main thing. And it's between the two. I mean, music is such a delight. It's like, that is my vacation. That's the part where I can always enjoy myself. So it's pretty much those things. And I like traveling to deep south. I have favorite places and whatnot. I like the Mississippi Delta is a big attraction for me, and I often stay in Natchez, Mississippi, which is one of the prettiest southern towns I've ever seen.
Oh man, yeah, we drove through there on our honeymoon, and it was gorgeous. Almost felt like staying.
And it's if you like blues, you can still there's still juke joints in the Delta, and of course we get jukes, we get honky tonks right in Texas. We still have our share of honky tonks that we can
Yeah, we got
keep their tradition.
we got this place down the road from us called Buck's Backyard, and they get some great bands in there. We just had Last in Line, which is got former members of Dio's old band, Vivian Campbell, and man, I tell you what, that was a blast. And every
Can't
weekend,
beat live music. Live music is the buzz. It's the when I lived in San Antonio, I'd often go to Green Hall, which is a storied venue, and see people like Hal Ketchum, from 4 feet away, and of course I think I saw Leon Russell Green Hall maybe 10 times. So it was like,
wow. Back in my 20s, we used to hit the bars a lot, and there was one place in Kemah, Texas, that we would go there just to listen to the music. It was a little Mexican place, or they served Mexican food, and they had a lot of great drinks there as well. Had my fair share of those. And they would have a blues band that would come there quite often, and I hardly ever missed them guys. Oh man, it's just something about that music.
I mean, there's very high quality musicians everywhere, and people, certainly in the 70s, going out and going to places for live music. Everybody did it all the time, every weekend. That's what it was about.
Mm-hmm.
And then somewhere along the line, we kind of lost that. And now there, just the number of venues who have live music is dramatically decreased. And the ones that are, typically don't pay a lot for the local musicians. So it's much tougher start these days for young musicians, I would say, versus when I was coming up. So it's sad. And also it has to, it's affected recording also, because now bands don't get a chance to develop. They're pushed very rapidly, and they're pushed into the singles game and whatnot. And they don't get the chance to develop. There's a million bands you or I could think of that, maybe their first album wasn't very good and didn't do very well, but they were kept on the roster, and then they came up with a masterpiece, or and then they really took off. But the industry isn't geared to that. They need immediate success or you're gone.
Yeah, that's why it's all corporate. They don't get a chance to show their real creativity. They're stuck in making those cherry pie type songs.
It makes no sense now at all when you think about their costs are so dramatically decreased as to what they used to be. You think that they would, be more inclined to develop artists, in-house and really build them. Because I mean, everything's their end of the equation is way down. It doesn't cost as much to make records, digital deliveries, very, very low cost, and so much of it's that way. And it's not as expensive as it used to be, and yet they persist on this, one and gone, where they chew up these young artists and don't compensate them that well either. So
There's some of these bands that they do the music in their home and record it on their own equipment. They get it on the computer, they get it nice and clean, and then they can upload it to something like Spotify. It didn't cost you anything. I mean, other than the equipment and your time. And there's some great stuff out there. But if they don't get that corporate backing, most of the time you never hear from them.
the major labels' main strength is their promotional activity, and they still hold near monopolies over some areas. Like take for Spotify, and the streaming services are kind of a good example. Major label influence on the streaming services is extremely high. So they're basically, they sign agreements, and then they know that all their artists are going to get pushed. So it's let's see, it's the usual situation, but I don't think it's not as an attractive time in a sense for musicians as it was in kind of the glory days of the 70s, I would say.
Well, as engulfed in music that I am, and I'll go listen to some of these younger bands that have some real musicians to them. They've got some great material. They sound great. You think, man, that should be on the radio. And there's hundreds of them out there. So there's quite a bit of competition. And to be able to get on a label and to get your stuff distributed, you really have to be good.
It's missing the forest for the trees. I mean, there's so much material out there that you almost have discover it by accident or by situations like we're doing now, where you come to attention and get on to different magazine sites and podcasts and interviews, and you have to build it up from the ground, and the bands have to do a lot more of this on their own now. So it's no longer just write a great song, make a great record. You've got to sell. You've got to push.
I mean, I'm not a huge name or anything myself, but it's an honor to be able to be a part of getting this out there and getting people to listen and bringing the attention to it. The stuff that you normally hear on the radio is garbage. And then you got people like you and several others that Billy's sent my way that like, these guys should be out there. They should be in stadiums and having millions of fans. And if I can help push that, that's special to me.
No, I think this is like community level action. I think it's great. It's if a couple people find their way to my music because of your interviews, then that's fabulous. That's just the way it is these days. And the other thing is, you're a devotee of music, and so it's fun to talk to people who are music lovers and engaged and think about these things and whatnot. So it's a good time, especially during my work day. It's wonderful.
Well, let's see if you can guess from my t-shirt who my favorite band is.
You like the complex stuff then, because that guy was a musical genius.
Oh my gosh. I had a guy on the other day. He's really into prog rock and that experimental sound. And we got into talking about Frank during his interview. And afterwards, he's like, do you want to do a Frank Zappa based podcast with me? I'm like, yeah. I could talk about Frank forever.
I still love prog rock. I mean, I've got an album that needs to be finished of my old band. It's now called Harlequin Reborn. But I also run, I don't know if you've ever heard of Rossfest, the Rites of Spring Festival. It's one of the oldest prog rock festivals in the United States. Used to be based in Gettysburg, and now it's in Sarasota, Florida. And we just had a 3-day festival, and when was it? It was in April. And in fact, it was Easter weekend, you know, so I'm still closely allied in the Prague area. In fact, I just got back from Italy, and I was at a Prague festival there. Right. So I like lots of different music. So I like that stuff too.
Do they do that same time every year?
Yeah, well, roughly around the same time. Yeah.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to look that up because
Yeah.
I'm gonna go.
Well, we had some good, like this year we had Jerry Harrison and Adrian Ballou with a big band, and they did the Talking. Of course, Jerry Harrison was founding member of Talking Heads, and they did Remain in Light, the whole album, from Talking Heads, and it was great. And then we had John Anderson from Yes.
From Yes.
Yeah, and yeah.
I think he's on somewhere on Billy's client list. I'm not sure.
Probably. I got to meet him. That was great. So it was, yeah, so I have that's another, so that's one of the things that takes up my free time, is doing that also. That's a nonprofit, by the way, so it's fun, so we have a board and try to find a way to deliver great music to as many people as possible, and also try to help young musicians. And
I usually don't get too overly excited, but I might freak out a little bit if I had John Anderson on my show.
He's very, very pleasant fellow.
Well, I feel like that kind of music is trying to make a push back into the mainstream, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, well, prog is, there is a bit of a renaissance of prog, and it's guys like, I don't know if you've ever heard Steven Wilson. So his albums are making it into the top 20 these days, so, and that's basically prog. He doesn't like to use the term prog because, some people just get turned off by the idea, but it's kind of arty rock or whatever, Everything used to be progressive, right? I mean, we used to be able to do whatever we wanted. Everything was experimental and whatnot, but there's some great new prog bands, relatively new, like Big Train is a fabulous band that's kind of in the classic tradition with great melodic songs and whatnot. So,
well, I had a musician from Captain Beefheart on my show. That was pretty exciting.
That's cool. Who was it?
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I'm having a brain fry at the moment. But
boy, working with Beefheart must have been. I've read a few biographies, and my God, that guy was out there. He was a genius in his own way. He was a fabulous artist, by the way. Did you know that? I mean, he made a lot of money selling oil paintings. So.
Yeah, I get that CRS the older I get.
Yeah.
It's frustrating because we actually became friends, and he's going to be mad that I forgot his name.
Cut that bit out.
I'm going to cut that out. Oh, man. I want to try to get Flo and Eddie on here. They're still together.
Cool. Yeah. Could you imagine somebody, there's like no label on earth that would sign a band that sounds like Captain Beefheart.
No,
none.
Never. I'd be surprised if somebody signed somebody that sounded like Frank Zappa, but I don't think anybody could sound like Frank Zappa.
I think they'd say it was inaccessible,
Although Dweezil, if he's doing his own thing, I'm pretty sure he's pretty close to his dad.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he was touring basically a Frank Zappa show. He was basically playing the music of his father, and it was supposed to be a great show.
Yeah, it's so sad that his family is trying to keep him from using the name Zappa. But
well, that's what happened. It's kind of Shakespearean, isn't it? The drama of the family.
So what is your biggest dream?
so my biggest dream would be able to actually have as many people as possible listen and like my music. And then I'd like to be able to, I'm doing pretty well in Europe, and I'm hoping that we do well enough so that we can do a few festivals. You know, Sun King Rising isn't going to be playing bars because, you know, we got to put 10 or 11 people up on the stage, you know, because we have horns and backup gospel singers and whatnot. So we kind of need festival type situations if we're going to authentically recreate, you know, these songs. I could go play solo and you know, then they'd sound like my demos and when I wrote the songs, but that's not the same thing as what people might be expecting. And I'm not gonna do it backing tracks. You know, I don't like that.
Well, I'm gonna try to put the one of the songs in the beginning of my show here.
Cool.
And I sometimes YouTube will block me and say this is copyrighted music, and sometimes they'll let it go through. It's just kind of hit or miss. So, but I'm going to give it a shot because I want as many people to hear.
That'd be great.
I'm gonna pick my favorite off of it and play on the
Good.
beginning.
Yeah, cool.
Buried in the Blues is my favorite on there.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. That's the one I didn't write. That's the one Ace wrote. So my producer.
I would pick that, wouldn't I?
No, I love that song. It's and I tried to do it. We did it as a I wanted to do it kind of Bobby Blue Bland style, you know.
Okay.
So I think we pulled it off. I mean, it's pretty, you know, that is the most organic song on the album. That's got the simplest kind of stripped down arrangement and whatnot. And it was a heck of a lot of fun to sing. So, and to play piano.
But you know, sometimes the simplest are the best ones.
If a song, you know, if I take one of my songs and they all start off with piano and vocal, you know, and if I can't sell that song with that, you know, just piano and vocal, then there's probably, you know, there's a weakness in the song. You know, arrangements give you the, you know, enhance the underlying song, but they can't, you know, make a bad song a good song. That doesn't happen.
Well, y'all planning on trying to tour?
Yeah, if we can get the right kinds of gigs. I just did we just had a release party for kind of insiders in the Sun King Rising fan base, and I did you know 45 minutes solo at the piano.
Oh man.
But I was actually playing songs from the next album that aren't even recorded yet because I just wanted to see how they were going to work.
And album release parties can be fun. My cousin had one at Fitzgerald's in Houston, and it was on Spindletop Records, which is kind of a spin-off of Warner Brothers. So there were a few Warner Brothers execs cool. There. They had the girl that played the cello on Tom Petty's man, what was that song? Well, it was off of his Southern Accents album. And there was a few other people. I didn't know most of them, but we're sitting there, and me and my other cousin, we weren't supposed to be there because we were only 18, but we were back there drinking, and these guys walked in, kind of weird looking, but they were cool. So we sat and we talked to them for a while. It's like, man, yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. Anyway, later on, after they had gone, I found out it was Depeche Mode. I mean, I didn't listen to their music, so I didn't know who they were, but I thought that was kind of cool.
It is. And it's always fun to find out how, you know, well, I don't know about them, but, you know, how normal musicians are. You know, I just got back from Italy, and I was, you know, got to hang with some great musicians, and it was just awesome experience.
Well, I'm surprised is how many that I've talked to that just are regular guys. They just want to be treated like everybody else, and they don't really care to be fawned over. And there have been a couple that are like kissing my ring, you know.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to sustain, you know. It's the day of the mega rock star is largely past. So at the end of the day, you have to relate to people as people. So I think, and you always hear about, you know, the nice folks, so who treat their fans well, and of course everybody has a bad day, you know. But then there's guys like Van Morrison's notorious for being a curmudgeon and nasty to his fans and whatnot. So, but who's written songs like Van Morrison? So he deserves it, right?
Yeah, well, you know, it is nice when they're just wanting to be a regular Joe and they don't expect anything special, especially when you're doing an interview. You think that they'd, well, you know, like I said, kiss my ring or fawn over me, please. And no, they're just saying, let's just talk.
Well, there's such a big discrepancy between, there are plenty of musicians, working musicians who make a living doing music, you know, and a decent living, but there's not many anymore who are becoming millionaires from music, you know. So it's a slog. Practically everybody, you know, even quite well-known musicians, you know, these days are always have to have multiple irons in the fire. And
yeah, it's starting their own businesses, selling clothes and jewelry or whatever.
You got to have multiple, as they say, multiple income streams is the required.
It's some of them will go out and just get a regular job. I mean, look, David Lee Roth was a ambulance driver for a while, so you never know. But,
well, yeah, I mean, when you think of things like insurance and whatnot, you know, it's you know, a lot of these, unfortunately, there's a lot of great musicians who don't have insurance because they have never been in stable enough jobs in order to have those kinds of benefits.
And then when you're getting up there in age, you have to go to the doctor a lot more often. That's for sure.
Yeah. A lot of them kind of miss the Social Security boat too, depending upon what their management was like. You know, they find out down the road that things weren't paid properly and whatnot. And so it's yeah, there's a lot of sad stories of great musicians, you know.
Well, they get famous overnight and then they're throwing money at them. So they go out and they buy all these cars and mansions. And I mean, same old story you hear over and over again. And before you know it, they've done blown their money and then they're broke. Then they're selling everything off. And then the hits don't come anymore. Well, then they're really in a sad shape.
Happens with sports stars all the time too. I mean, where any place where longevity is kind of limited, you know.
I had a buddy of mine that he played for the Indianapolis Colts and the Dallas Cowboys, and he ended up opening his own like sports equipment company, and I think he owns a McDonald's franchise and other stuff. He put his money in all kinds of places, so he's retired and enjoying it. Got to be smart about it anyway. But
it's true with everything, isn't it? I mean, it's just it's the you know, the skills for life.
Well, when you get up there where Van Morrison's at, then don't forget me, okay?
I'm gonna. That will take a mercurial rise for me to get to that in the time that I have left. I'll tell you.
I'll be Joe Rogan and you be Van Morrison. How's
cool.
that?
All right.
But John, it has been a pleasure talking to you.
It's fun talking to you. Yeah, thank you.
Man, I wish the best for you and the band, and
thank you.
I'll get to see you play one day.
And thanks for actually listening. It's always nice when somebody has listened in advance.
I've listened to what Billy sent me, and I also looked you up on Spotify. So
Okay,
I
great.
listen to that stuff as well.
Cool. I appreciate it. And like I say, it was a really nice meeting. I hope we can meet in person someday.
Thank you. And I also want to thank all of you out there. If you are new to the channel, I appreciate you stopping by, and I hope you'll subscribe. For my regulars, you know how much I care for y'all, and you know, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be doing this. So until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network